Hey guys, how's it going? Preparing here. So in the background, I'm going to show you guys a promenade map that I ran solo, I think 2 nights ago, just so you guys can see how ridiculous some builds are in Path of Exile. I could, maybe do these maps on some of my other characters, some of my less geared characters, but definitely nowhere near the speed at which I do it with this character, the Burning Discharger that I've been playing for, several weeks now. The first thing I really want to talk about is what really constitutes a really overpowered character. Because, a lot of people like to have their own builds. They like to try to, figure out what works, what they like to do, and what's ultimately going to be really successful. And, I've delved into builds quite a lot. There are, good builds of all sorts. You can practically make any skill, except for maybe like Searing Bond or some crap like that, viable endgame. But there's some really strong builds, and they really have several things in common that you probably should be looking to if you want to make a really overpowered character during this state of the game. So number one is a lot of these characters are Chaos Inoculation. They're energy shield based because in this game you take a crapload of burst damage, and that's really the main thing that will kill off your character. And being able to overcome that, you just need a larger health pool. Potions will often not help because you're just going to die before you can react, or in one hit in some cases. And Chaos Inoculation or just Energy Shield with like Chevrons or something like that really allows you to push the limits of your effective health pool without pots to a limit that is far exceeds life-based characters. So as a result, although it's kind of hard to set up a CI character if you're a newer player, you should be gravitating towards something like it. The other thing is, most overpowered type of abilities in this game are spells and curses. And I guess totems, but as you can see in my example here, totems are not required. The reason this is so is because with melee attacks, you have to invest too many points in making them adequately strong, and to make them really strong in many cases stacking them with crit multiplier and stuff, you just have to invest an absurd amount of points to put these at the same level as some spells in this game. The recent melee buff was really good, but overall, as I'm sure many of you guys have seen, people that you group with, the melee builds are really on a lower level than the spell builds. Spells are really the most overpowered things, largely because they're very flexible. So, in my particular case, I use Discharge. Discharge takes care of almost every monster in the game, and the ones that doesn't take care of, like bosses, I have Fireball. I can just use a different ability, and my entire passive tree and my entire gear set augments the ability equally to my main ability. And this is not really possible with many other characters. For instance, if you were a melee character and you were, based around an AoE skill, which most characters are nowadays, if you had like the Ground Slam or something like that, your single target, what are you going to do? Heavy Strike? You're going to Heavy Strike Maze Vault down? No, you're not. You might use like Lightning Strike, but the projectile off Lightning Strike, if you don't scale it properly, it's going to be junk. So that's really the idea. Their spells are much more flexible. It doesn't require as much passive tree investment, and the gear is also more flexible because, for instance, if you have like a wand or something like that, yeah, you can get a wand that has twice the stats of maybe the wand that you're using now, but it won't double your damage, it'll just increase your damage by a bit. But when you're converting, damage from weapon sources, if you get a weapon that's twice as good, you will actually do double damage. And this kind of plays into effect where they have to balance the game around the top end weapons, and unless you have really good gear, you're not going to reach that peak of what your character is capable of doing. And as a result, overall, your character's going to be a lot shittier until you get some really good gear, and even then, maybe not quite. Though I don't want to discourage people from, rolling whatever build they want, but it is important to really realize the state of the game that we're in. Yes, it is Path of Exile, and yes, things will likely change, but, melee has been in a bad spot for a very long time in Path of Exile, and, if you really want to, hit up that end game as hard as possible, have the most powerful character, do all the maps, get a wide currency pool, there's a few things that you gotta watch out for, and that's pretty much, Roland the kind of character that's able to do all of that on a lower difficulty level. So that's it, guys. Hopefully I've influenced a few builds out there, because it's a pretty important thing out of Path of Exile. It's pretty enjoyable to make some, but in the end, you gotta go with what works. Well, I guess maybe not. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.